I want to look at two studies in which vegans were compared to omnivores or non-vegans, and muscle gains were exactly the same for both groups. And I'm excited about these studies because these really disprove some of the common protein myths out there, which we'll talk about. So let's get into it. All right, so when it comes to plant-based protein and building muscle, you commonly hear this idea that, first of all, plant-based proteins are not as quote-unquote bioavailable, and essentially that you need to eat more plant-based proteins in order to get the same results as if you were to eat animal meat or dairy. And the other idea is that it's not as effective at stimulating certain muscle building responses in the body, anabolic stimulus, things like that. So let's actually put that to the test and let's see what do the studies actually say about that. All right, so we'll look at not just one, but two studies. And as far as strength gains, there are actually tons of studies out there, and they all come to basically the same conclusion that a vegan or vegetarian diet is basically the same as an omnivore diet for strength gains. And if we look at this study done in 2021, where they were looking at muscle growth, they took two groups, of course, vegans and omnivores, and what they did was they normalized both of their diets to 0.7 grams of protein per pound of body weight per day. So basically, they made sure that each group consumed the same amount of protein. And of course, the vegans were doing all plant-based protein, and the omnivores had a mix. And in order to get their numbers up to the 0.7 grams per day, if they needed to, they would supplement the vegans with a soy protein, and they would supplement the omnivores with a whey protein. And so the results of that first study, when they measured muscle gains and strength gains, was exactly the same. They were almost dead even as far as any kind of muscle gains and strength gains. And they actually concluded, researchers said, quote, a high-protein, exclusively plant-based diet is not different than a protein-matched mixed diet in supporting muscle strength and mass accrual, suggesting that protein source does not affect resistance training-induced adaptations in untrained young men consuming adequate amounts of protein. So there you go. They concluded that it did not matter the source of protein, whether it was plant-based or animal-based, you're going to get the same muscle and strength gains. All right, so let's try another study. In 2023, they did a similar study. They put participants young adults through a squat and deadlift routine, and it looks like they had them on a really high protein diet of 2 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. And same thing, they either had them on vegan or all plant-based protein versus omnivore mixed protein. And again, at the end of the study, they had the exact same results. Muscle gains were almost dead even and no differences at all. Same with strength as well. And the researchers in this study concluded that omnivorous and vegan diets can support comparable rested and exercise daily muscle protein synthesis rates in healthy young adults consuming a high protein diet. This translates to similar skeletal muscle adaptive responses during prolonged high-volume resistance training, irrespective of dietary protein provenance. All right, so both groups of researchers concluded the same thing. A vegan diet or just eating plant-based protein has the same exact results as eating animal-based protein for muscle building and strength. And there's even a famous bodybuilding researcher, Eric Helms, PhD, and he's even quoted as saying, "There's no reason a well-designed vegan or vegetarian diet can't be just as effective for bodybuilding as a diet that includes meat." So there you go. This guy has tons of research under his belt, and the conclusions are always the same. Just as these studies show, you're getting the same response from plant-based protein. They're just as bioavailable, and they're just as good at stimulating muscle building and strength gains. All right, so just as I've mentioned in previous episodes on plant-based protein, which I'll link to, where I go more in depth into a lot of this research and dispelling these myths. As far as athletes, we're seeing a lot of vegan athletes, including the strongman Patrick Babaumane, NFL defensive players, vegan bodybuilders, etc., etc. So, really the conclusion is as long as you're getting enough protein, you're going to build just as much muscle. Now, I will note that it can be a little bit more difficult to get higher protein levels on a plant-based diet, and you need to be aware that you're eating enough calories, first of all. If you're trying to build muscle, that's usually why bodybuilders will bulk, to get an excessive amount of calories and protein to ensure that they're building enough muscle. And you can also even do a supplement if you really want, a vegan protein powder. I'll do something on pea protein coming up where there was tremendous results with that. But there are many different plant-based proteins out there now. And also tofu or soy is another tremendous source because that's a very high protein plant-based food that you may want to add to your diet as well. Definitely recommended. And you can even find these higher protein tofus where they're kind of condensed and you get a good amount in those. So that can really help to up your protein levels if you are an athlete and you're trying to build muscle. Because when you do work out the muscles, you will have a higher protein requirement. And, vegans do get enough protein, as I've talked about before, and especially for sedentary adults. But, if you are working out, like I said, your muscles are going to require more protein just to rebuild. So that's why it's good to be just more conscious of what you're eating and getting higher protein intake in. But it's completely possible on a plant-based diet. And there's also, some ideas that the plant-based protein is also going to be healthier for you. There's, kind of these ideas that maybe animal-based proteins may be activating certain things like mTOR, which leads to aging and also tumor creation, maybe disease. So you don't get that kind of negative drawback with the plant-based proteins, at least not nearly on the same level. So you'll get the same amount of muscle building properties, but without the negative drawbacks that come with the animal-based protein. So overall, it's going to be better for you, and that is the better choice. And obviously, of course, it's much better for the animals as well. All right, as always, you can find links to the studies down in the description, as well as any useful resources, including some plant-based proteins and some vegan meal delivery services, as well as other good supplements. And thanks so much, everybody, for listening. I hope this was useful. And remember to subscribe, as I'll be back with some more great studies and tips. So thanks again.